Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Teen Wolf. So something I'm going to quickly go ahead and point out. It's something I didn't really notice until they pointed it out. Apparently, literally everyone in Beacon Hills has been taken because this police station was completely empty and they were bringing it. I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that because I was like, why would the police station be completely empty? Because like, the fact is, I mean, it's like when it's at selective areas, it's like they only focus on certain things, but it's not like they would have given you an opportunity to really notice it. I mean, because it's like, you haven't really been in a very populated area in like the past couple episodes, so you really wouldn't have noticed it. The town population is quickly slowly deteriorating, but it's like I did not know we were that close to like literally the town being a ghost town, because the only ones left are literally the main characters. I mean, crap, you had Argent and freaking Melissa being taken. Now that just boomed. I was like, no, because at the same time I was also worried. Like she's like, go ahead and crack the whip. I was like, please don't decide you're going to change your mind and just take a bite out of her head. Like, because like I said, I'm still bouncing around that thing in my head, but maybe that was just something. Now I'm starting to think maybe that was purely just to kind of mess with Scott's head. But I didn't even think about it. It's like, wow, the whole town was gone. I saw the empty police station, but it didn't cross my mind to think like, oh, that's weird, when I should have in fact been thinking, oh, that's weird. Big thing in this episode is the fact is that Stilinski finally remembered Styles completely. He pushed himself to remember, and then he saw the thumbtacks and the yarn that, so famously that Styles used, when it came to his crime board, putting all the pieces together, and he did it all across Styles' room, and he brought his entire room back. He was super happy and everything. He brought Claudia in to show it to her, but she didn't see anything. The moment she stepped in, it all disappeared. I'm like, oh man, he's taking a step back, or is this when he's going to call her out for being fake, not being real Claudia? Now, about them circumstances, this episode also, it made an interesting thing, because I'd always misinterpreted, Claudia's situation. I kept thinking like, oh man, like she's there trying to stop the truth from coming out about Styles, about the room and everything. I was like, oh man, what is she? Did the ghost, like, what was her whole circumstances? Like, I knew she was a ghost, but maybe she was coming back, afraid of dying again or something like that. No, because she's literally a reflection of Sheriff Stilinski, like his inability, like basically going back to it, when Styles left, his love for his son was so great that he needed a hole to fill that emptiness, especially because like Styles was all he really had in his life since Claudia died, so he needed something in his life, so he kind of called out and brought Claudia back, but she was just a mirage that basically everyone in the world, I guess, like it's never really explained, but I guess you could think of it just hey, the supernatural world, chalk it up to that. And it's just, she was there for as long as Stilinski wanted her to be there. It's because she was a mirror reflection of his desire to, the reason why she was always in Lydia's way, just seemed like she was kind of getting in the way, like I kept pointing out, is because, not because she was really trying to, it was because on some level Stilinski was, because he wanted to hold on to her. There was probably something in him that kind of felt like, no, something isn't quite right, but he wanted to ignore it. He didn't want to accept the fact is, even like, remember last episode, he kept pushing Lydia away especially when he's like, oh, I'm ready to listen, but then she starts talking, he's like, no, you're crazy, you're just a desperate girl, who needs some serious, see what I mean? He was fighting it so hard, so it's almost like Claudia was in that room with Lydia during that conversation, so she wasn't necessarily a bad person, it's just, she was kind of an after, like, Noah's desires given form in the form of his wife Claudia. So, but he finally came to the terms. He's like, I remember everything. I remember when Styles sat on that bed with you, talking to you so much, almost afraid to go to sleep. And then, that, she closed her eyes like one last time. Like, there were no words actually said between her and Stilinski, that basically she was holding Styles. She closed her eyes like, it's just a beautiful moment. He had his wife back. Styles had his mom back, but that time she closed her eyes was the last time. And the moment he looked back up, Claudia was gone. So, like I said, it was just kind of interesting seeing that kind of cleared up in my head. We also learned a lot more about Douglas, about his circumstances. I remember hearing that, but it didn't click in my head. I was like, oh man, he's still like, oh man, he's throwing the ghostwriters at them. They're going to laugh at you, you idiot. And I was like, oh right, that was that's a thing that's about, like, that's a pretty well known thing about the Nazis. Apparently they were super into the occult, so the supernatural is kind of right up their alley. Especially Douglas's like group, they were a specific part of the Nazis that dealt with the occult. They kind of to tap into it. And what he wanted was a ghostwriter, because he wanted the ghostwriters as a means of building an army that couldn't be killed, that couldn't be stopped, to help them win the war. Obviously, the general kind of laughs at him, and well, not the general, but that guy, that officer, that soldier or whatever laughs at him. He ends up ripping his throat out, which the others didn't react. So, I mean, they reacted, obviously, but they were just like, oh, a monster or anything. So they must have already known what he was, which begs the question, why the hell would you laugh knowing exactly what he was? I mean, I didn't see him rip anyone else apart. Maybe he did. Maybe that was the first guy that he ripped everyone else apart. But nevertheless, it's like, if they did know what he was, why would you laugh? Why would you kind of make fun of him like that? Not unless they were supernatural things too, that he just happened to like kill that guy before the guy could really defend himself or anything. I don't know. But kind of another situation showing you just how powerless anyone is against the Ghost Riders, because basically all the soldiers were there pumping them full of lead. It didn't do anything. At one moment, it seemed like one of the Ghost Riders got knocked off the horse, but he just does a backflip and just kind of lands, and it's like, okay, just kind of showing off at this point. But they effortlessly take down everyone, just knocking people around with their moves, shooting them and whipping them off until that in-between world. So Douglas himself knew that he was no match, ended up getting whipped in his back. So it wasn't enough to make him go away, kind of like the same situation with Argent. The wounds weren't, enough for him to be taken away. But what it did do is like it made his need to kind of find a way around everything, to this army and everything. He went to the Dread Doctors, and the Dread Doctors imprisoned him in that capsule. Now, from what Theo was saying, that basically from a combination of that wound, because basically the wound was still open because it doesn't close because of its supernatural nature, and because it's a particular wound from them. Like, because with Argent, the wound wouldn't close unless Melissa got the specific medicine to close it. So what ended up happening is the blood pooled up in what he was kept in, so it mixed in with that as well as with the fluids. It basically gave him the powers, of an alpha, a low image, and a Ghost Rider all at once, and he was basically soaking in that for like 70 years, which, going back, that's what we ended up finding out, that he isn't just a regular werewolf, he's a Lowen witch, which basically makes him half werewolf, half lion, which is kind of interesting, which isn't too much of a surprise. I mean, obviously you got Malia being a were-coyote, and then you had Kate being a were-jaguar. So, but it's just like, it's interesting. It makes me wonder, how does something like that happen? Is that like a natural born species, or is he the only of his kind? Obviously, this is our first introduction into him. I mean, there's other circumstances, because it's like, I mean, you look at the chimeras, like Tracy was basically based around a God, what was it? A kinema, that's it. I literally had to pull that from my brain. I was like, what was she again? A kinema. And Jackson ended up becoming one himself, but I mean, then later on ended up getting turned into a werewolf. Like, it seems like they're not just so, like, it makes you wonder whether something like him is a soul thing, or is there something more? Like, we don't know. Like, whether, like, maybe one of his parents was a lion, one of his parents was a werewolf. I don't know. I mean, not like a lion, but like a were-lion or something. Or is it just like he's just naturally born? Like, how did he become what he became? Maybe that's something we'll kind of learn later on. But the question does come up, is like, okay, so if he is this, like, the Nazis are gone, like, what does he want to? Is he following the Nazi rule and just wants to rule everything? Which technically he does, but it kind of points out, it's like, no, the Nazis were always like a means to an end. For him, it was all about getting an army. So he doesn't care about the circumstances of how he gets it, but that's what he wants, is an army of his own, an unstoppable supernatural army. And that's what his goal has always been, and that's what he's aiming for now. Quickly kind of going back, it's like the whole Theo thing. The sword's broken now, which the sword can be pieced back together, but the only person that can do that is Kira. So like I said, I think I got that wrong. I thought they couldn't actually put him back, that they were bluffing the entire time. But the fact is, they were so hesitant about breaking the sword, they could actually send him back. So, but now it's broken. Obviously, Theo's still locked up even by the end of the episode, but what the fact is that they're like the only ones left in Beacon Hills, is kind of like they will have to kind of rely on. Which even brings up the fact is that obviously you got your things where it's probably like, hey, Deaton is also the actor who plays Deaton is also on The Walking Dead, so that's one reason why he probably isn't around. But it's like out of anyone, he was taken type of situation, and it's like, I mean, the fact is that they're only ones in town means that he was taken, unless he's out of town again, which he has done in the past, just up and disappeared to go somewhere else about. So I mean, usually it's tied to the story and everything, but I'm sure that's probably like the main reason behind that too. Is like, just so that's probably one reason. Just like, oh yeah, he was off screen taken by the Wild Hunt essentially. So. Like, we still don't 100% know, like it's not 100% defined, 100% like guaranteed, but like it's obviously gotta be Douglas. And now I guess I understand why. It seems mainly because Douglas escaped their grasp, so it's like they're always gonna come after people that escaped them. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. Because I was wondering, like, what his history was with the Ghost Riders, and now I see the history. It's because like I said, I'm guessing, I'm still trying to understand 100% of what eating the back of their brains does for him. It makes you wonder, did he do it with the mob, not the mob, the Dread Doctors, too? Did he do it to them when he had the chance? Maybe he did. Maybe that was something that came up at the end of the season. I don't remember. It was kind of an interesting plan that Scott and them originally had, because Scott was like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to cross over. More particularly, I'm going to cross over. I'm assuming Malia was going to go too, but it's like, go over there and I'm going to bite Styles. Because the only way he can come through is because a normal human would burst into flames and stuff like that upon touching the rift. There's no way to kind of get past it by that. But the only people who can get by it is like someone supernatural, in their case, a werewolf, because it won't kill a werewolf. It'll mess them up just like it did Peter, but it will be enough that they can actually heal from it. So it's like turns Styles. And Peter made a remark of like, there's a whole aspect of turning Styles. It was almost like, he was almost like, that's actually a good idea. It does make you wonder, does Peter actually regret ever biting Scott? That he didn't bite Styles instead, because Styles, like I said, Styles is like the focal point of this group, because he was like the super smart one. He was the one that literally figured a lot of stuff out. Hence, going back to the whole murder board situation, like he was the one who kind of helped figure out the puzzles and everything. Or was it be a situation where it's like he kind of wishes he bit both Scott and Styles? Because he brought up Peter brought up the fact it's like, I'll admit it, Scott, you've gotten out a lot of situations where you've obviously been in a disadvantage. Scott has literally been in a disadvantage every season and yet came out on top. Against Peter, against Dekanima and Gerard, against the Druid, against a pack full of alphas, against the Nagitsune, against a Red Jaguar and Berserkers, and as well as Dread Doctors and the Beast. Like, he's come out on top after all that, but then he's like, you facing this thing, it's unbeatable. How can you fight something like that? You can't. It's like the only option you have is to run. He's like, yeah, I said I was going to help, but I'm not going to help you, talking to Malia. He's like, I'm not going to help you kill yourself. But at the last minute, he shows up and protects her, because the Dread Doctors are like, oh, I mean, not the Dread, I'm sorry, I keep meshing stuff up. And I did mean meshing and not just messing, guys, whatever. The Ghost Riders were later on trying to kill Scott and Malia. It wasn't just about sending them to the other side. It's like, no, straight up killing them. Because I still not 100% of how he's doing it. Like, I think maybe somewhere in his body, because of all he was doing, like, the reason why he could fight a Ghost Rider, obviously, is because he was becoming like a Ghost Rider from the wound mixed with the fluid and everything. The blood from that just mixed with the fluid kind of made him like a Ghost Rider. So he kind of had the same power as them. So he can, I mean, he's already naturally super strong, but then on top of that, the fact is that he has the powers of a Ghost Rider. It does make you wonder, could he take wounds like a Ghost Rider? Like, a Ghost Rider can take a whole bunch of bullets without being affected. It seems like it probably gave him part of being, obviously he's like part Ghost Rider, but it's like eating that part of that other Ghost Rider, I guess, made him even more like it, the whole glowing green eyes thing. And then also to think about Parrish too, like, he's able to get Parrish to do whatever he wants him to, have him rip open the rift so that they can cross and everything. So, like, I don't know, because the Ghost Riders are connected to death, the Hellhound is connected to death. Like, that's the only thing that's the only comparisons I can really draw as to why he can control them, and the reason why those Ghost Riders were trying to kill them instead of, like, pop them off is because it's like, oh, no. Like, for Douglas, it's all about, like, hey, I might as well just get rid of Scott, and Malia is like, you're just going to be trouble later on, so let me just get rid of you. But it's like, he had them pop someone like Peter. I was like, oh, man, Peter's about to die. Okay, good. Peter's still alive. poor Liam literally saw what happened to Mason in front of him. I was worried about the whole Corey situation, but it's like, nah, they found his phone and everything, and they still remembered him. And it's just like it's hard to really say like 100% of like what they remember at this point, because they haven't really gone into detail. But like, oh, I forgot this and that. Like Scott's calling his mom. But it's like, does he really remember the fact that he has a mom, or, you know, whatever? Like, let's say the circumstances are different in this. Like I said, going back to it, Gwen's parents disappeared, her sister disappeared, but she was the only, but she still remembered her sister rather than treating herself like, oh, I'm the only child. She remembered she had a sister. And in this case, you know, did he remember he had a mom, or did he check his phone? Just like Mason looked through the phone and saw all those pictures of him and Corey, and he's like, there's only a picture of us. And Hayden's like, it makes sense. Like, obviously he loves you. So it's a circumstance of like, I want to kind of believe that Scott probably didn't remember his mom, but happened to look through his phone and he saw, like, he's trying to remember, like, okay, who else is there? And he saw a contact for his mom and he called her but couldn't get to her. So it means she's taken now. But then it's like, to have Mason taken in front of him, and I love, like, Liam got super pissed, like went charging and fighting Ghost Rider, didn't do him any good, couldn't beat it. And then they got Hayden, and they were holding on to that whip for life, like grabbing onto it, because like it only fully affects when they pull back, because once they pull back, once the whip kind of snaps when it pulls back, that's when it gets taken. So as long as they kind of keep it from being pulled, that's fine. But another one comes and got Hayden's grabbing it with her other hand, but then she's like, Liam, just go. You're the only one that can help with this whole situation. Just, I'll be, you know where I'll be. But hate, like, Liam didn't want to leave her, but he didn't have any choice. And it's like, bam, she got taken too. It's like, in one fell swoop, he lost his best friend and the girl, like his girlfriend, dude. That super sucks. And then once again, we still don't know what happened to Theo. Last time we checked, Theo was still locked up, but I mean, those circumstances can change easily. I'm sure he'll squirm his way out of there. It's like, obviously, he wants to help with this situation because it's all about survival now, because it's like he doesn't want to die, because he could easily just be taken as well. But at the same time, it's like, let's not forget that situation, literal similar circumstances when the Beast came back. He's like, yeah, the fact is, yeah, when it's all said and done, we're in this together because we have to stop the Beast, so it's the same circumstances of like, hey, like he could easily change on the fly at a hat. I mean, once again, though, we saw Peter change. He came back. Mainly that was for Malia, but that does show some change within him. So maybe Peter can be a good guy in the future. I don't know. Theo, still hard to say. He says like, oh, I'm not after power. I'm not after a pack. Maybe the pack thing. I don't know. Maybe there's still a part of you that's like itching for that. But at the same time, it's like the power thing. It's like, I highly doubt that. I'm sure you're just like Douglas, and the fact is that you want more power. So, I mean, a thirst for power never goes away. So, especially because he grew up without power, and I guess, it kind of, I mean, especially after everything he went through to get the power. So, you saw what lengths he was going to go to, last season, even before that, getting these powers himself, like, the lengths he'd go through. So what's to say he won't go down that path again? Like I said, it's hard to say, so. Another thing that came up is like, Lydia was right there in front of Liam, and one of the Ghost Riders pointed his gun at her, but then it just lowered it. And then it's like, Liam's kind of, oh, it must be scared of you or something. And then Lydia, I'm sorry I do that. Lydia's kind of like, no, it's not scared. It was just kind of indifference. Basically, the question is, I guess they can't ghost the Banshees. Like I said, Banshees are kind of like outside the realm of the supernatural, of like being affected by everything. Like, they kind of cross the borders, with, I guess, because kind of the same way they can't get rid of a hellhound, it's because Banshees are connected to death too, so that kind of makes them special. So it's kind of like, well, Lydia's going to be alone at the end of all this anyway, so might as well leave the Banshee alone type of situation. So that was kind of interesting. And then finally at the end, you had Sheriff Stilinski coming to them, telling them that he remembered all this stuff about Styles, and that the fact is that he saw the little light we saw at the beginning. I was thinking like, oh, Styles came back completely, but it's like, no, Styles didn't come back completely. But he's like, I swore I saw him, and then it clicks in everybody's head. What happened was a rift opened momentarily because the sheriff remembered Styles, but it's closed now, just like the other rift. So it's like, no, the only choice they have is they have to remember everything about Styles and create a rift of their own. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see how that all plays out. Like, it is just crazy, dude. Like, everything's coming down to the wire. I ended up looking it up. This is episode 8. So that means there are only like 2 episodes left of like this first half of the season, which is a little depressing because it's like, oh God. You know what that means? That means we're just that much closer to this ending. I don't want it to end. I don't want you to end, Teen Wolf. I love you too much. Oh, it just sucks. But at the same time, it's like, I'm so excited to see how it all goes down. Like, oh, like, holy crap. When you think about it, literally everyone from Beacon Hills is there in that world now. So it's like, is this really 100% about Douglas trying to get him, or is there something more to it? Like, I hope we do get a better explanation of what the whole situation is between, you know, the Ghost Riders as well as the Hellhound. Because the fact is, it's not even just, well, he's only able to do it, he's only able to control it now because of the whole Ghost Rider situation. But we saw before that the Ghost Riders can kind of talk to the Hellhound. So, like I said, my only explanation for it so far is it's got to be some kind of like supernatural connection to death. Like, if you have some connection to that whole world of death, then like you're immune or like have better control of it. Because he is kind of like, whereas Banshees kind of announce death, I guess you could say Hellhounds are kind of like the guard dogs of death, or rather like the harbingers of death, because they kind of sniff out death. So as Ghost Riders are the people who kind of go on hunts and I guess kind of dealing with the soul and everything. I don't know. I guess like you can call them kind of like, where if the Hellhounds, the guard dogs, I guess you can look at them as kind of compared to not necessarily the Grim Reaper, but close enough, I guess, especially when you look at them. It's not even something I ever thought about. It's like, technically, they're the Grim Reaper mixed with cowboys, if you actually think about it too much. I mean, really, I'm sure if you don't, I mean, that's really just not really 100% true, but it's a close comparison. So it's the Hellhound is the guard dog, while the Ghost Riders are kind of the gatekeepers. So I guess that's the real best comparison to me. So still a lot of questions. Hopefully we get some of those answers. I'm very curious to see how this will all play out. It's like, how do you stop Douglas? Fact is, he has this whip and everything, and apparently has like the entire Ghost Riders behind him. And it's like, how do you stop them too? It's like, where is this all going? How is this all going to play out? Overall, a very good episode. Just super, super excited to see where it goes next. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.